Good afternoon, I'm Giovanni Dennis with the Midday News. A special welcome if you're joining us online at onespotmedia.com. Calls for serious intervention in Manchester this afternoon as COVID-19 cases continue to spike in the parish. One councillor is now suggesting an outright lockdown to get the outbreak under control. The details from Krista Campbell.
Thursday's municipal corporation meeting in Manchester, and again medical health officer Dr. Nadine Williams was the bearer of bad news. COVID cases continue to soar in the parish, and some residents are making matters worse.
Persons are still attending parties, still attending big funerals, grave digging and such gatherings. Persons are still not wearing their masks in public spaces as they should. And persons are still going about their business when they are symptomatic. So when we call the persons who are positive and we interview them, you will get perhaps sometimes up to 20 contacts. And these are people who are symptomatic and yet they are still going around and exposing other persons.
669 confirmed cases in Manchester since the outbreak of the pandemic last year, 50 of them active, with 24 deaths. But even persons who display symptoms of the virus and those who have been confirmed positive are still causing problems.
And even when they're told that you need to be quarantined because we make telephone contact initially and then we'll give them the physical copy of the quarantine order. So unless they have that physical copy, they still feel as if they can go about their business freely.
Events over the Christmas period are largely believed responsible for the new spike in COVID cases, but councillors insist the police must do more to enforce the law.
Mask. We had an officer who went to a club the other day because we still have to do the club visits, and nobody in the club was wearing their mask or physical distancing, and that's just one instance.
When I drive through the division, some areas, 3 parties next door, one here, one here, one here. People all over. It's not like a cookout that you send out the food. People are, and no mass, your worship.
Funerals are also a major concern for which one councillor wants funeral home directors and ministers of religion to be held accountable.
Funerals are bigger than usual. And they cannot be controlled because they're in an open space. Probably we could go back. Personally, I think we should go back to the church where you can control the amount of persons who come to church. And as I saw happen at a funeral, everything was done inside the church. The body was coming out, section of the service was done in there. So when they went outside, all they did was to put the body down. You probably need to start holding ministers responsible. So if they go to a funeral and see the crowd too big, they say, no, I'm not doing this. And if they know the body won't go down, they'll do something.
The councillors also want increased protection at the parish markets, which are also believed to be a source of further spread of the virus. Krista Campbell, TVJ News.
A 42-year-old woman from Manchester is the latest to die from COVID-19 in Jamaica, pushing the island's death toll to 323. The Ministry of Health says 2 more deaths are being investigated. Meanwhile, the country's COVID-19 case count now stands at 13,992. A 19-day-old child is among 77 persons who tested positive for the respiratory illness on Thursday. The number of persons hospitalized with COVID-19 has climbed to 107. 8 are in critical condition. Meanwhile, Mayor of Port Maria, Richard Creary, is worried that the number of COVID-19 infections in St. Mary might soon surpass that of St. Anne and Manchester. Speaking at the parish's municipal corporation meeting on Thursday, he said the spike in COVID-19 cases is causing businesses to close. He cited instances of this happening in Highgate and Port Maria.
It is alleged that there are 2 positive cases in Richmond. One of the gentlemen owns a business place. So when I went there yesterday, persons were saying they don't understand how that business place wasn't closed down and the other persons tested, etc.
He's urging residents to adhere to the COVID-19 safety protocols. There's a call this afternoon for the amendment of the Terrorism Prevention Act to allow persons who import illegal guns and ammunition into the country to be branded as terrorists. The call comes from Councillor for Montego Bay Northeastern, Senator Charles Sinclair, days after Monday's major gun bust at the Freeport Wharf in St. James. He was speaking Thursday at the St. James Municipal Corporation's monthly meeting.
Somebody must have been involved from within for somebody to take that up, make that chance to import anything. Because everything at the court is supposed to be scanned based on the information at that. So, Mr. Chairman, what I feel this morning is that within this country of Jamaica, people who walk amongst us, is that we have some people that are going to brand as terrorists. Because it could only be a terrorist, Mr. Chairman, who would have contemplated bringing into Jamaica that type of weapons. And the only purpose that you can get from a firearm and gunshot is for people to be murdered.
Now 19 firearms, including 6 high-powered rifles and just over 470 assorted rounds of ammunition, were among the items seized on Monday. Senator Sinclair added that such criminals should not be afforded constitutional rights.
The reform that we need to have is the reform that is going to allow the government that has a duty to protect the life of every citizen of Jamaica to take some hard and drastic action against persons who behave and conduct themselves as terrorists and want to import into our country things that are not manufactured here for the sole purpose of causing danger.
Members of the public have until Friday, January 29, 2021, to submit written comments to the Joint Select Committee of Parliament on the National Identification and Registration Act 2020, also known as the NIDS Bill. The bill has been resubmitted with changes the Justice Minister believes will make it more appealing to Jamaicans. Prince Moore reports.
The controversial National Identification and Registration Act NIDS back on the table and at an advanced stage of discussion in the House of Representatives. Justice Minister Delroy Chuck again insisting it will be a game changer.
I must tell you that there's no doubt that this new bill is a less cumbersome, it's clearer, and there's no doubt that it utilized the judgment of the Chief Justice.
The initial introduction of the NIDS was widely criticized by the public, with the main concern being the types of personal information that certain government officials and agents may have access to. But with the changes made to the bill, he believes the public will welcome NIDS this time around.
This bill reflects what would be acceptable to the public in that it is voluntary, as where in the last bill it was mandatory. And that was the main challenge.
He says the government stands ready to accept additional suggestions to ensure the new system benefits all Jamaicans.
We are taking it to the public to tell the public this bill is not cast in stone. In other words, if you have a suggestion to improve the bill, we are willing to examine it. So this process of lawmaking is making it very open and transparent.
Persons who are interested in making a contribution to the NIDS bill can log on to the House of Parliament website at japarliament.gov.jm and access the National Identification and Registration Act 2020. Prince Moore, TVJ News.
And despite the assurance from the Principal Director of the National Identification System that personal information will be kept safe, there will be penalties for any security breach. Attorney General Marlene Malahoo Fort believes it is an area which needs special attention. Sandy Williams has the details.
A $3 million fine for breaches of people's privacy under the National Identification System NIDS was proposed at the second public consultation held by the Joint Select Committee of Parliament reviewing the NIDS bill recently. That proposal because, according to Justice Minister Delroy Chuck, Jamaica is trying to move away from imprisonment as punishment for crimes. He believes that penalties should be reserved for persons who pose a danger to society. During Thursday's virtual National Identification and Registration Bill Town Hall meeting, concerns were raised about the sufficiency of the fine to guard against data leaks. Foreign Affairs Minister Kamina Johnson-Smith argued that there are persons for whom a fine would not prove a deterrent.
A fine is not always the most effective legislative penalty, where it is that there could be pecuniary benefit in the offense. So if a person was incentivized to breach the obligation of secrecy for monetary gain, so if somebody was selling information for personal gain or for enrichment, it is possible that, and this is how organized crime works, they budget for the risk versus the fine. But criminal, or rather imprisonment, imprisonment is something which is very different.
It is why Attorney General Marlene Malahou Fort believes the issue requires special attention. She's urging members of the public to provide feedback on the penalty for privacy breaches.
It is helpful to us as legislators to hear the perspective of persons, because I know many are extremely concerned about the privacy rights and issues of that impact them in very fundamental ways. So if it is that the considered view is that such a high premium must be placed on discharging the duty to keep the information communicated secretly and confidentially, that any breach of it by a current or past employee should land them in prison if they are convicted of the offense. Then it is a matter that the committee will take under consideration.
Sandy Williams, TVJ News.
And we now take a break here on the Midday News, but please stay with us. We'll have much more when we return. Welcome back, and we're continuing the news. Foreign Affairs Minister Kamina Johnson-Smith says the U.S. government has apologized for its actions in the recent detention of 4 Jamaican fishermen and the subsequent destruction of their boat, Lady Lala. The U.S. Coast Guard arrested the 4 men in territorial waters pursuant to the Ship-Rider Agreement, but the Southern District Court of Florida ordered the men's release. Senator Johnson-Smith disclosed during this morning's sitting of the Senate that the apology came during a bilateral meeting held on January 6. The Jamaican delegation included the Ministers of Foreign Affairs and National Security and the Attorney General. Senator Johnson-Smith says the meeting was convened to discuss improvements to operating protocols and procedures under the Ship-Rider Agreement relating to the boarding and searching of vessels, among other things. The Transport Authority is moving to transform the public transportation sector with intensive training of taxi operators, beginning with St. Thomas. Now, through sponsorship from the British Caribbean Insurance Company, BCIC, and collaboration with several entities, including the Fire Brigade and police, taxi operators will receive first responders training to make them better equipped to help in motor vehicle crashes and other life-threatening situations. General Manager in charge of operations at the Transport Authority, Ronald Anderson, says a critical aspect of the initiative is improving the safety of passengers. He says a travel PAL app will soon come into full effect.
They are traveling aboard one of your taxis. Should they be abducted or anything, they are in close communication with their family members and others. And when the constabulary force needed to go into quick operation mode, that service will be available.
Additionally, the Heart Trust NTA will train taxi operators in customer service, and they will also be trained in defensive driving. Attention is also being placed on COVID-19 safety, so taxi operators will be given masks for students who do not have the protective gear. There will also be talks are also in train for regular deep cleaning of vehicles. The Fair Trading Commission, FTC, is now conducting a study on the communication sector. The study will determine the competitive effects of wholesale agreements between internet service providers and the subscriber television operators who provide internet services to final consumers. The FTC will review, among other things, the terms and conditions under which enterprise broadband ISPs offer services to cable TV operators. It will also assess the extent to which these agreements adversely affect cable TV operators' service to consumers. The study is slated to conclude in March this year. To news and sports now, the government is facing mixed reactions to news that a series of meetings will be held with the country's sporting associations to determine when various sporting disciplines can resume locally. At least one sporting association head says the government is lagging behind with the resumption of sports on the island. Jermaine Brown has this follow-up.
Technical teams from the Ministries of Sports and Health were due to meet on Thursday to further advance discussions for the safe return of sports locally. This was announced in a press release on Wednesday by Minister of Sports Olivia Grange, who also stated that a series of meetings will be held with the country's sporting associations to determine when sports can resume locally. But one local sporting association head, who asked to remain anonymous, said the government was way behind with its plans for the resumption of sports, especially with some sporting disciplines having already resumed since the initial lockdown in March last year. The unnamed source also said the government needs to provide designated protocol plans to the sporting associations instead of inviting them to bring their own plans. A quick check shows horse racing has resumed, and to a lesser extent track and field, with the MVP Velocity Fest series in August 2020 and the Tisler Mills meet at Calabar in December. There has also been road racing and lawn tennis. But are the sporting associations aware of the planned series of meetings? President of the Jamaica Basketball Association, Paulton Gordon, says the issue is when will the meetings begin?
We heard that this was in the pipeline, and we're not too sure when this will happen. But we eagerly await that opportunity to have that discussion with the Ministry of Sports because we want to get some things moving. It's a critical time in terms of some of the activities that are precursor to competitions in the summer. So we want this to happen and happen in short order.
Last weekend, 2 local high school track and field development meets were postponed, while the return of the National Premier League continues to be delayed despite an announcement of its return from late last year. General Manager of Independence Park Limited, Major Desmond Brown, is urging the government not to put sports on the back burner.
So we have not had any major meet since COVID. I know I've been talking to another organizer who spoke about having his team stay at their schools, come run their race and go back to school. That's all that's kind of planning that they're trying to put together so that we can have some events. Because I think we now know how important sports is to our whole psyche and to the development of the country. We have been without it for almost a year, and we'd really like to start it again.
Meanwhile, the Ministry of Sports says a 3-pronged approach will be taken in conjunction with the Ministry of Health for the safe return of sports. Most sporting disciplines have been sidelined since March 2020 due to restrictions brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. Jermaine Brown reporting for TVJ Sports.
And that's the Midday News. I'm Giovanni Dennis. Join us at 7 for Primetime News. On behalf of the news, sports and production teams, have a good afternoon.